So contrary to most Indian parents, I got very lucky in that my parents were they really pushed entrepreneurship a lot, which
Huh.
is really rare in an Indian household. You usually are kind of supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer or it's like pretty much like
Those two.
those are the two main ones. Um, but my parents got married when they were like 21.
Mm.
They had just finished college and they moved here a week after they got married.
Oh, wow.
They moved to Queens, Rego Park. 21, didn't have any family
Yeah.
here. Um, and also didn't know what they were going to
Do here.
do. They just kind of like roomed with friends and and they came here for a better life. Like that's why
Mm.
they came here. They knew that if they lived in India, there wasn't much room for growth.
Mhm.
They both came from poor to low middle class families, and I don't know. I guess my dad just like he had a commerce background. That's what they call it in India, and that's kind of equivalent to a business degree.
Okay.
And he's the one who really kind of started doing the entrepreneur thing, kind of working as an accountant.
Mhm.
In New York, he used to work as in the accounting department of Maza Mango Drinks, which is this Indian like drink company, which has an office in New York. And he learned how to drive on their box trucks because like the delivery drivers would like
Wait, that was his first driving
that was his
experience?
first driving experience. And that's how they learn things. And
Mhm.
everyone would kind of like get their first job because somebody's sister's friend had worked at this
Yeah.
shop and was like, "Oh, like they're hiring, like come on down." And everyone always lived with other people. Like
Mm.
you got to America, you lived with your sister
Mhm.
and her family until you found an apartment. And sometimes you'd have like 10 people in a one bedroom apartment.
Wow.
And yeah,
Wow.
that's how
10 people?
yeah. Actually, my husband's family, I think when he was really little, they had like more people than that. But that's just how you saved money,
Mm.
and that's how you kind of like took your first step, and that's how you supported each other.
Right.
Um, but as my dad was working for other people, um, they moved down to Atlanta because of just more community,
Mhm.
and he started working as an accountant for somebody, and he realized he was like, I'm kind of good at this and I could like do this myself. um and and so I remember he started his own little office. He had like a handful of clients, and it was in the loft of our house, and he had this little makeshift
Hmm.
office, and I kind of watched him through the years go from outgrowing that office to moving to like the actual like formal dining room, which is now turned into his office, to like a two-person office, to a
Hmm.
five-person, to like now he has a really big team and he's at a firm for like maybe like 20 years.
Wow.
Um and and we always think about my dad being this entrepreneur, and he's always been like, I have two sisters.
Mhm.
They're younger than me. They're twins, and my dad's dream is that we start a business together. That would never happen. Um like it could, but like it wouldn't last. Um but yeah, so he's always been like, I want you to be self-sufficient.
Hmm.
Moving to America, he's like, I don't want you to be depending on anybody. You're all you're all girls, and like I want you to like, if me and your mom aren't here to support you one day, like we want
Be
you to
able to
be
take care
like,
of yourself.
we got this.
Mm.
Which is pretty empowering because I feel like in an Indian household, that's not usually the thing. It's you're
Mm.
kind of babying your
Mhm.
daughters, and really feeling like you need to take care of them all the time. And so we kind of had like a really interesting upbringing. And at the same time, my mom um, didn't really have as much of an academic background. So she really waited tables. She
Mm.
worked at Shoney's. She worked at Golden Corral. We
Mhm.
ate there all the time because of the employee discount, and it was great. Um, we've gone back now as adults, and I don't know if we love it as much, but as kids, it was like,
It's
oh
an
my
adventure,
God, it
yeah.
was so great.
Yeah,
It
I
was
got
like
so
all
many
you can eat.
options.
Yes. And so she kind of did a lot of that until she finally ended up I remember in middle school we bought, and this was a really interesting experience to see as a middle schooler, but
Mhm.
we bought a cafe that my mom was working in, and it was a like a restaurant in an office building, a beautiful office building. And it was huge. I spent my summers there every day. It's how I learned how to use a cash register because I was the labor there, and really watched my mom, who's more of a timid person. Her English isn't as good as my dad's, just like thrive. Like
Mm,
I mean, it was her place. I learned so much from watching her. And and that was kind of also like where I kind of got this little bit of a background in like food.
okay.
Just watching how that restaurant
Right.
ran. Um, and as a and then 9/11 happened,
Mm,
and that was a weird thing because we're not only are we Indian, we're also Muslim.
mhm.
Um, and we kind of watched that restaurant be kind of taken away from us, and it was
Wow.
kind of like a weird, like we really knew what was going on. Um, and that was like a weird kind of reality to see that like you could be really good at something, but
It could still
that doesn't
be
mean everyone's going to perceive you
that
as
way.
a
Yeah.
happy, great way.
Right,
Yeah.
right, absolutely. So you grow up in this environment where you have the support to be an
Yes.
entrepreneur, which is interesting because I'm curious to know if like you ever resisted it then.
Well, my dad's thing was like, I want you to be an entrepreneur. So one day I want you to take over my accounting firm. Um, and so the Jasani last name can like live on through this. I don't know. And I mean, when I went to college, I honestly, like you mentioned before, I had never seen anyone do anything but these
These
like,
other things,
very, like,
yeah.
cookie cutter jobs, yeah, and so I I really in college, I was really interested in art history, like,
Mm.
I was super into I thrived in all my art history classes, I loved that, but I had never seen an Indian person who was a museum curator, like, I didn't
Mm.
even know if there were other jobs out there, like,
Yeah.
what do you do? And my parents would have totally supported that, but I myself was
I
like,
don't know that this actually exists. Like, I feel like
yeah.
you go down this path and you're like, if it didn't work out, you're like, that's a lot of years.
Exactly. And also it's like nobody that looks like me fills these spaces.
Mm.
So maybe maybe it's already been established that I'm probably not going to be good at this or maybe I
Hmm.
just don't have the background.
Wow.
So when I started college, I was studying accounting. Which very quickly I was like, "Whoa, this sucks and I'm not good at
Not
it
doing
at
this.
all." I'm not good at it at all. Sorry, dad. I'm really bad at it. But then I was like, I guess I'll do something in business because that's something that's like, I kind of know where I'll
You
go with
know, yeah,
that.
you've been around it for quite some
Yeah.
time.
So I studied business in school
Hmm.
and then kind of went into like a very um kind of like a corporate path.
Yeah. What
Um
did you think about it? Like, did you enjoy it?
my first job was in New York. I was a commercial underwriter at a commercial insurance
Oh my
company.
goodness.
Um, and I thought that was really cool because I
Yeah.
was like, I'm getting paid a
That's
lot.
so it's like a serious like
Yeah, and I was like, and I get to be in New York. This is awesome. And then I was like, after a year, I was like, I got to get out of this. This is this is kind of boring, and like also like fake it till you make it. Like a
Yeah.
lot of it was like I I
I don't
can't
know
get
this.
passionate about this. I just can't. I don't know. And then I kind of went into I also once again felt like I was like, well, how do you get out of this?
Yeah.
Like, because you're often like, I don't have all the experience that I need to
Mhm.
do like what I think might be the dream job. And I went into consulting, but once again, consulting and all my clients were insurance companies. And that was really cool because I got to travel a lot. I got to travel internationally and got to
Yeah.
live the consulting life. Um, but within like 2 years there, I I felt like I was so overworked. I was traveling so much.
Mm.
And I just had this day where I was like, I don't mind being super stressed out, but if I'm going to be really stressed out, I really want it to be something that I care a lot about.
Hmm.
Like how cool would that
Would
be?
that be right?
And that was kind of where I was like, I can kind of do anything I want to do.
Mhm.
So like maybe I need to find what I need to do.
Hmm. So, at what point did you think I'm gonna go into the chai business?
Like I can't like 20-year-old me would be like, "What? You're sitting in like you're on this stage talking about chai. That's like so random. I was in New York and I got really into specialty coffee.
Hmm.
This was when like Stumptown was becoming really
Mhm.
popular and everyone was kind of like, Starbucks is cool, but
But have you heard about this
yeah,
third wave?
exactly. And that was like the buzzword, right? And so when I was in New York, I was on a consulting project where I didn't have to travel. And if you've ever lived in New York City, your home is most likely like the size of a closet. So like working from home was like very difficult. And so I would just like coffee shop hop all week.
Really? You're just
Yeah.
jazzed up on
Yeah.
caffeine?
Yes, everywhere. And I just really fell in love with coffee culture.
Hmm.
Um, the whole idea of coffee shops bringing people together, like
Mhm.
how many coffee shops out there have like you've been sitting next to somebody and like they're on their first date or like they're on a job interview or they just, found this like figured out this equation to
Yeah,
like something that's going to change the world.
right.
And I was just like, this is so fascinating. And then also, I was really interested in the supply chain of coffee
Hmm.
because why was my almond milk latte $8? But like Folgers is like
Like
kind of the same thing,
mhm.
but it's like not that
No, way
expensive.
cheaper.
Like what does craft
Mm.
mean? What does specialty mean? What are they actually doing behind the bar?
Mhm.
And there was a moment in time I was really, really into coffee and I met a coffee shop owner in Atlanta who had just opened up this really beautiful coffee bar and boutique. And I was there for 2 hours talking to her. And I was just like, "Oh my god, you're amazing." And then I looked her up on Instagram and I was like, "She's like a year older than me. Like, what? Like, I could do this." And I told my sister that day, I was like, "What if I quit my job and opened up a coffee shop or opened up a coffee
Yeah.
roastery?"
And she said, "You're crazy?"
No, she was like, "Yes." And then I told my dad that night.
Oh boy.
And that was interesting. I was a little nervous to tell him.
Mm.
And he was like, "Yeah, that's great. Totally support that. But you've never worked a service job in your life. You've never waited tables. Like you've never done any of this. So it's,
Mhm.
just like
A little different.
yeah, like it might seem really like amazing, but it's going to be a lot of hard work. So like make sure and they've done it, so
Yeah.
they knew. Um but he was super like, you why don't you barista? Like why
Hmm.
don't you learn?
And then see what you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of sat on that a little bit. It's really hard to quit your job when you have a pretty good job.
I mean, I did that over pandemic and it's like, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
it's hard. Yeah, and every like, you're like, "Oh, just one more paycheck and like and then and then I'll be good."
Yeah.
And I 3 months later I quit. Like I was
Wow.
just so like on that.
Mhm.
And I made it a point to tell myself that if you quit your job, you can't start looking for another job.
Hmm.
You have to spend like a little bit of time to figure out if there's anything else out there.
Yeah.
And so in that period of time, I don't know how I decided on Portland. I really don't.
Yeah, how you go from
I got here
Georgia
on a whim.
to Portland?
Well, I was in New York then,
You're
right?
in
So I was in New
New
York.
York then, okay.
That was like when like it was 2015. Portland was becoming really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
Like everyone was talking about Portland. And
The
I
audience
mean
is like, "We've been cool."
and a lot of people had told me they're like, you should go to Portland, you'd really like it. And I was like, well, why not? Like I have some time. Let me like spend a weekend in Portland. So I looked up, things to do in Portland. And I was like, this place looks so cool. I got to spend more, like a
More
weekend
time,
isn't
yeah.
enough. So I decided to spend the summer there and also realizing that it's so big in coffee.
Mm.
It was such a great, and then I was like, nobody's going to hire me because like you have to like be good at coffee to work in Portland. I was like, I'll just knock on doors and get like,
Yeah.
just work for free. I just like what happens? I don't know how to use an espresso machine. Like someone teach me. And I mean, Google led me here because I found Tabor Space,
Mhm.
which is a community coffee. They have a community coffee shop, and they used to do, and I don't know if they do anymore, but they did like a barista training program. You'd
Mhm.
volunteer your hours, and that's really where like that summer I learned about coffee and like what goes into it. And by the end of it, I was like, oh my God, I should be paying more for my coffee. Like there's so much work that goes into it. And that's like before, the beans even like this is
Mhm.
after the beans get here. I'm
Get
not
here.
even talking about before that.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I got to
That's how you got
Portland.
to Portland, and so you got to Portland, but you didn't in your business isn't coffee.
Exactly.
So how do you go from
Yeah.
coffee to chai?
So so I had never used to order chai at coffee shops because, and this is the Indian in me, I'm not gonna pay $6 for something that I can make at home, and like probably better, because the only chai I'd really had like out before that was when I was in college. I
Mhm.
would drink Starbucks
Hmm.
Oprah chai, like specifically that one.
That one.
And I really loved it, but I didn't love it because it tasted like chai. I just loved it because, like, who doesn't love cinnamon, milky, like,
Yeah,
goodness?
right, right.
And so that was a drink that I really loved. But so when I got to Portland, I was learning about coffee, I was learning about roasting, and I remember going. I like will never forget this day. It was like a defining moment. But I remember going to this very well known coffee shop, and like that day I didn't feel like drinking coffee. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to order chai because I know that this company cares so much about their coffee. They must be putting the same
Same
amount of,
effort into the
yes, like
chai.
their chai must be spectacular. And I ordered it, and like the whole I can like play the whole thing back in my mind, but I ordered it, the barista put it down in front of me, and before I could pick it up, he picked up a shaker of, I don't know if it was cinnamon or nutmeg, and just doused the entire thing. And I was like,
What are
"Wait."
you doing?
Yeah, like, "What? Like, what is that?" And so I sat down and I took a sip, and I was like, "Oh, that's because this tastes like nothing. Like, it just
Mm.
doesn't taste like anything."
So he's trying to add something
Yeah,
to
I was like, okay." And that's when the wheels started spinning, and I was like, well, one, it was a lot of, like, a little bit of anger and disappointment and
Mhm.
feeling like, well, why is this the case?
Right.
In a place like Portland, right?
Yeah. Where you come and you see like everything else has so much intention. You're like, why doesn't my chai?
Yeah, like it was like I don't want this drink that means so much to so many
Mm,
people. And like I can get really passionate about chai and the history
mm,
of chai, but it just means so much that how can it just be a line item on a menu?
mm,
And I don't want it to be
mhm,
that.
mhm.
And so that's where I kind of had this realization of like, wait, maybe there's a different problem to solve here.
Hmm. And so is this also 2015 or is this
Yeah,
2016 now?
this is like while I was this 2015 while I was here. And then so just to like a little bit more background, coffee shops, chai is traditionally made on a stove,
Okay.
and you brew your tea with your milk and the water, and milk is like cooked
Cooked
with
in the
the drink,
okay.
right? And the reason why coffee shops aren't able to get that same exact flavor is because coffee shops don't typically have stovetops, right?
Hmm.
So they don't really have the means. All you really have is an espresso machine. You have
Mhm.
that steam wand.
Right.
Um, and so and to be able and I learned this because I was working in a
You were
coffee
working in
shop.
one, so you
Like,
knew.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if we want to flip drinks and we have so many people and you don't want them to have to wait, you need to use a concentrate or a
Mm.
powder mix to kind of help you get there.
Mhm.
And so then my question was, okay, well, why are there not better concentrates out there?
Mm.
Like, can we have like a product that one has like, I mean, I could like look at it and be like, well, they're using the wrong type of tea. Like, I could tell you that because the tea that I see is not the same tea that I see in my mom's cupboard.
Mm.
And can we use like better ingredients?
Mhm.
Can we really layer flavor to figure out, can somebody sit down and drink this and be like, "Oh, I taste tea, I taste spices, like I'm tasting all of these
These different
things."
things. Yeah. I see
Yeah.
it's great when you really are passionate about it. So you make this pivot and you start your own chai concentrate business. And I think while you were starting One Stripe Chai, right, you said you started to learn a lot about your past and your family history
Mhm.
and like how chai has impacted your own community. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit about some of those things you discovered?
Yeah. Um, I think that for me in my life, like identity has been a really kind of played a big role in trying to figure out like who I am and where I fit in. And whether that's the context of being an Indian Muslim woman
Mm,
or being, a first generation Indian American. And so selfishly, owning a chai company has allowed me to learn a lot about just kind of like my background. I think one misconception that people have about chai is that, and like rightfully so, understandably so, is that chai is this like ancient Indian drink.
Mhm.
It's not. Um, l- I mean, the British literally brought tea like cultivation to India in like the late 1800s.
Mm.
Chai in its like recreational drink form has really only been around like since like the early 1900s. Like
Hmm.
that's not a very old drink.
Yeah.
And I think that because it's a drink that came along with the colonization of India, it's really impactful. Um, India in its like current form has only been around for like 70 years, right?
Mhm.
So the country's pretty new.
Yeah.
Um, but you suddenly had nobody drinking chai in a country to like a billion people drinking it every day. So I would say like the British are one heck of marketers. And I find that so interesting because the story is that China had this monopoly on tea,
Mhm.
and they controlled all the prices, and the British really loved tea.
Yeah.
But they couldn't, they had to pay whatever the
Right.
Chinese wanted.
Of
And
course.
so I think that they realized tea grows wild in parts of Northeast India. And I think somebody noticed that. And I'm not saying tea leaves were never used, they're probably used more for like medicinal reasons. But somebody noticed that and said, hey, like this like climate works for tea.
Pretty.
And so I read a bunch of stuff on this, but I think like China had like you couldn't enter mainland China. You could just kind of like trade at the ports. And the British had like sent somebody to like infiltrate and go in there and steal some tea plants, and they planted some in different parts of India, mainly the Northeast,
Mhm.
and which is where Assam is, and kind of built these like tea plantations. And not only did they do that, and that was so we can now get like cheap tea,
Mhm.
but I think a part of it was like we have all these laborers that are essentially free,
Yeah.
we colonized them.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
let's get them to, make this stuff for us.
Wow.
And I think what people don't realize, and this is a lot from us going on sourcing trips,
Mhm.
realizing that, there was a lot of displacement of very poor people from
Mm.
other regions to come out to
Come to
these
work.
tea growing regions. Yeah.
Wow.
And that has had a huge lasting impact on 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 India in general.
Mm.
So I think that learning that is very interesting. And I think when I was looking around at like the chai industry as a
Mhm.
niche at that time in 2015, I was like, well, nobody doing this looks like me.
Mm.
Like nobody like do they know what they're selling? Like do they
Hmm.
know the story behind it?
Mm.
And for me, like I think what's really cool about my job is that one, I get to talk about chai every day. I have such a personal experience with it. Um, but I'm getting to talk about and share my experience,
Yeah.
not my interpretation of somebody else's experience,
Mhm.
which is really powerful because at the end of the day, like whether, money or whatever else is successful or not, like I get to talk about something I really care about and
Right.
really share something that like I feel like I know in a really personal
Intimate.
way.
Yeah, no, I think it's really special to be able to be that close to something that you get to work on every day.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really interesting to learn that history from it, because to your point, there's a lot of things that get made every day that no one has any idea what that story is. And
Yeah.
the in my opinion, the best products are the ones where you know the story, you know the person that made it, or you at least know, kind of how it came to be,
Exactly.
right? Thinking about like this journey you've been on, right? And we could, I want to talk to you for like hours, but as you think thus far, like you've been extremely resourceful. You've been in the weeds and really getting into the details of things for someone else coming up, maybe a young
Yeah.
Indian woman or just another entrepreneur. What advice do you have for them as they think about maybe they might want to create their own beverage business?
Yeah. I think that I wanna sit here and say, like, if you have an idea, go for it. Like, I think there's so much more to it than that. I'm, like, not a huge risk taker, ironically, not, like, a huge risk taker, so I'm, like, very, like, calculated risks. Um, but I think if I was talking to somebody that was young and was Indian and, um, I think that from when I was doing this or when I was growing up, there's so many role models now.
Mm.
Like, there are so many people out there to, like, if you're trying to convince your parents, like, "Hey, like, I wanna, like, own a beauty brand," like, there's plenty of South Asian women who have just killed it,
Yeah.
and so, like, use that and, like, use that to your advantage, to really paint this picture of I think when our parents came here, they came here with nothing, right?
Yeah.
Literally nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Probably a little bit of debt, and, like, that's about it, right?
Mhm.
And so, I think for them, raising us in general, there was this whole idea of, like, we worked so hard to get you here, and we just don't want to be taken away from you, and so, really, we just want you to, like, only be in these industries where, like, we know you're, like, you're
You're
good to
gonna
go,
good to
you're
go.
re
You're
yeah.
gonna win. You're gonna be successful.
Exactly, and so, it's not really because they're like, "I don't want you to be happy," but it's really about, like, we want you to be, like, really successful and
Mhm.
be and not have to worry about things and not work as hard as we did.
Yep.
Um, and I think now, like, there's so many conversations to be had to say, "Hey, like, we can kinda balance both, like, you kind of actually brought us farther than,
Then
you
you
thought
think,
you would, and,
yeah.
like, we can kinda do both," and I think that's really cool, and I think being open to, like, embracing that and having conversations around that,
Mm.
is really helpful.